turn it over to Kathy.
Great. So I want to say good morning and welcome to everybody. This is the second in our communication with ALA and interviewing the upcoming ALA presidents that are running for the election. And I just want to welcome you all and thank you all for being here. We were just talking how it's great that we have Zoom now and we can have these kind of sessions. We've found them to be very important and very informative. And so I want to welcome Emily Drabinski to our morning and thank her for taking time with our community to talk and answer I'm sure a lot of questions this morning. And Emily Bergman is going to be doing the communicating and have the conversation with Emily Drabinski. So I've got the Emily B and the Emily D. And again, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast and in the middle of the country, and welcome. And I'm done now, so.
Thanks for that. Welcome, Kathy. And I only speak to other Emilys. That's my sort of set of priorities. So I'm glad to have you here with us, Emily.
Emily's rule. Just a reminder that the recordings of our conversations with the two ALA candidates will be posted tomorrow. So if you missed the one from last week, you can always go back and look at that one. So I'd like to introduce Emily Drabinski. Who I am. I'm Emily Bergman. I am one of the AJL co-liaisons to ALA. So Emily is the interim chief librarian at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. That was a mouthful. She's been a librarian for 20 years. And what I really liked about, and this is true for many of us who've been in libraries for a long time, what I really liked about her bio is that she has done everything from loose leaf legal filer to a library director. Yep, I can relate. So Emily, why did you decide to run for ALA president?
It's such a great question, Emily. And I don't know if there are other loose leaf legal filers on the call, but do you remember those rubber fingers? I worked in San Francisco at a sort of company that hired people like me to go around to all the legal offices, to all the libraries, and the onion skin papers from the IRS updates. And you don't want to lick your finger too much. So that rubber finger, I still remember. So why did I throw my hat in the ring for ALA president? It's a good question. We all have a lot going on, right? And I have plenty of commitments right here at home in my library. I began as interim chief of this library the day after the pandemic hit. And so have been managing operations from my bedroom and now in my office where I've been for a little while since last June, I guess. And it's been a challenge, as I'm sure it's been a challenge for all of you. When I think about the professional association that is my home, the American Library Association, I want to lead it because I believe it has such an incredible influence on the shape of every experience of every one of us who works inside of the library ecosystem. So ALA is 50,000 members strong, more than 100 years old. The Washington office does incredible work, moving legislation that benefits all of us. The Office of Intellectual Freedom, we see them taking on more and more challenges as the sort of climate around freedom to read gets more and more challenging. And so all of these big operations are things that I think ALA makes it, I think, the most important professional association in libraries and maybe the most important professional association of its kind in the country. I think we might be the biggest. So what I think the association is struggling with is things like membership, engagement, a sense among younger library workers, especially, that ALA doesn't serve its needs. I'm a big Twitter person. I'm on social media all the time, and I see lots and lots of complaining. ALA isn't doing this, it isn't doing that. And my background includes a lot of union work, a lot of organizing work. And so I'm very familiar with the sort of complaint to demand pipeline, that if we're going to spend a lot of time complaining about what our association isn't doing, we need to both reckon with what it is doing and make clear that everybody understands that, the membership to external audiences. And then we need to take control of it and make it do the things that we want to do. So I think there's that's the sort of reason I wanted to throw my hat in. I'm also like a person who's interested in a crisis, right? Pounced right into this position when the pandemic hit. I became president of my union local when we were locked out by our employers. These moments where change is happening and things are in flux are moments where I really am, I want the ball, you know? So I don't want it on behalf of me, I want it on behalf of all of us who see libraries as essential social infrastructure, as crucial to the public good, and having big national conversations that include libraries at the center of that is sort of the thing I'm after in my campaign, and as well as if I elected would be the hallmark of my presidency. So that's my little pitch, Emily.
My cats are running around, so I muted.
Ooh, you're so lucky. Yeah.
What is your vision for ALA?
I think we need to have a mighty fighting organization. And I think we do in many ways already. I started library school in 2001, got my first library job in a library a week before September 11th. And it was at a public library branch in below 14th Street in Manhattan, which if you remember New York at that time was when we couldn't go below 23rd Street, right? So my branch was in the sort of disaster zone. And being a librarian at that time was really powerful for me. I was a member of an association that took seriously the freedom of speech and the rights of everyday Americans to privacy. The association stood against the Patriot Act. It was incredibly inspiring to me. And in a time of real despair in the city and despair in my own life, trying to like make my way in the city in the wake of that, I really leaned on the association as a kind of story that was bigger than me, a story that was bigger than the personal experiences of me in a library, that seemed to pull all of us together around shared values and commitments. And that was really powerful. And I think the association still does good work like that, but the sort of communication piece and the organizing piece and the engagement piece has seemed to drop off a little bit. And I have felt less enthusiastic about it. And I don't know, maybe I'm the only one in the room who has felt that, but I know I hear that a lot from my colleagues and from library school students. I teach in the library program at Rutgers, and I've taught at Pratt and have taught at Syracuse. And when I meet with the students in those classrooms, they don't feel inspired by ALA. So my vision for the association would be to return it to that place that I had in 2001, when I felt like I was a part of a big movement for things that mattered to me. And so building some of that enthusiasm around the association, keying into what younger members feel is missing and bringing that sort of to the forefront in the mainstream of the association, things like climate change. You know, if you're a young librarian and you're looking at your career unfolding in a time of climate crisis and devastation, you want your association to take those issues super seriously and put it at the center of the platform. And you know, that's what Patty Wong's been doing with her campaign. Rebecca Smith Aldrich and her work on Sustainability Roundtable has been doing that work. It's part of Les's program. And so I think the association has all the pieces there, but what's missing is a sort of sense of leadership that's will make that story bigger for more people than just library workers, so that everybody in the country can see how much it matters. Like, I really think if we solve the problems of libraries, we would solve a lot of the problems that we see in our society today. So my vision for the association would be to sort of push on the things that it's doing already, but bring an organizing mindset and an organizing approach to that, so that everyone feels like they have a shared stake in the association's success, because the association's success is the success of those of us who work in libraries. So, yeah. I wish we were all in a room together. I know that Zoom like facilitates a lot of things, but I do miss the sort of energy we would have if we were together someday.
So let's get to HAL issues. I have a couple that I want to share, and there's at least one that I see on chat.
Okay.
We'll definitely get to those.
Great.
Some AJL members have experienced microaggressions when trying to participate in ALA. For example, book award committee meetings are regularly held on Friday nights and Saturdays. Another example is that the upcoming JCLC conference is being held on Yom Kippur. In actuality, a significant number of Jews identify as people of color, and yet they and all other Jewish librarians are made to feel unwelcome at the JCLC conference. How would you advise us to address these concerns? And would there be meaningful change under your leadership?
So I'm going to admit something to the group, and that is that these are mistakes I have made in my own professional career and in my own lifetime. One of my projects has been editing a book series about gender and sexuality issues in librarianship through Librarians Press and Libwin Books. And we've had colloquium that we hold, pre-pandemic, we held every 2 years to sort of highlight the issues that had emerged and come up through the sort of academic work being done in that book series. And without consulting the Jewish calendar, I scheduled one of those colloquia over Passover one year. I'm not Jewish. I don't come from a Jewish background. It hadn't occurred to me, right? And that I think is the problem, right? It hadn't occurred to me. The way that I learned that I couldn't do that ever again was my girlfriend who was like, I'm Jewish. You're part of a Jewish family now. We have a Jewish child together, and you cannot schedule things over Passover. You cannot schedule meaningful things on Fridays and Saturdays. And so it happened once and it doesn't happen again. I'm not I'm not an organizer of JCLC, so I don't know what happened there, what their position is, but I think it's an indication of the sort of frayed connections between all of us. I do believe that if we are all sort of connected and working towards shared goals and shared values, those kinds of mistakes don't happen. So for me, what it took was a deep and meaningful personal connection to someone Jewish. It took raising a Jewish child in my home to really open my eyes to those issues. Now, I don't think we all have to go out and move in with Jewish people to take those kinds of concerns seriously, but I do think we need to have thick connections with one another. So the problem there is a problem of communication, of relationships, and those, it sounds to me, need to be rebuilt.
Right. So there's two sides actually to this question. So let's get out of JCLC for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an ACL conference in Baltimore, and I was going to attend, and it ended the first day of Passover, right? So Passover always starts the night before.
I remember that.
I would have to miss the last day to get home so that I could get a Seder on the table that night.
Yeah, I also left early that year. I remember it. Yeah.
Oh, you remember it too. Okay. So one of the things that we in AJL talk about is that things like Yom Kippur and Passover and Rosh Hashanah these are the holidays that like we don't work. It's on everybody's calendar. How do these things happen in ALA, and what can we do? So when that happened, I emailed the ACRL president and I emailed the ACRL executive director, and they said, "Oh, thank you. We'll never do this again." Well, yes, they've never done it again. But here we have another conference happening on one of the holidays where we don't work.
So there needs to be an accounting for that, right? So the association, the organizations that do this, that make this kind of mistake, and I don't know that it's a microaggression. I think it's actually something more significant than that. If you are systematically excluding one part of the population from participating in your events, it goes to like, so that's not a small thing. That's a big thing, and there needs to be a sort of public accounting for that. And then, it's not a mistake. It's like an actual real problem when you are making it impossible for some members to participate. So, what change would come under ALA because of my presidency? It's a little unclear, right? Like I would have to be president to see how that would happen. What I can say is that those dates are on my calendars also, and so that would be something that I would certainly be mindful of since it impacts me and my family, but that shouldn't be that way. It should be on everybody's calendar, every religious holiday. So here in New York City, all the religious holidays are days off for school, right? So it's not just the high holidays for Jewish librarians, it's Eid, it's Chinese Lunar New Year, it's all of those things that we have to keep in mind. And so if we're going to be a culturally competent and a culturally responsive organization that's inclusive of everyone, that means everyone. And it means paying attention to faith traditions, which it sounds like is a sort of connection that needs to be made more clear and more fully integrated into the ways that we talk about diversity and difference in the association.
Well, and we all know what a problem it is for Shomer Shabbos people who, because our conference, the busiest day is Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. An ALA publication on microaggressions says, believe colleagues when they tell you about their experiences. Being dismissive of your colleagues' accounts and feelings or claiming they have been too sensitive are in themselves microaggressions that invalidate their experiences and cause harm. How do AJL members and other Jewish librarians get our voices heard and respected and responded to that our experiences are real?
Can you tell me more about that question? Is there a particular kind of, is it more than just this sort of date on the calendar? Is there something else?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Yes, there are things such as when, and I'm talking about a global thing, like somebody working in a library may want to go for a higher level job in a library, but because they observe the Sabbath, they are not available to work on Friday afternoons and Saturdays. And there are a lot of people I've heard from, especially since we started these conversations, that are telling me that they are told, don't even bother applying for those jobs because, you know, your availability isn't going to work for you. So that's kind of the thing we're talking about a little bit in the microaggression. I don't, like you, I don't necessarily know that those are microaggressions. Those seem to be blatant, like discounting of people because of their religious beliefs, that they can't participate at a level where they're capable and competent. They just aren't available on a Saturday. I mean, that seems to me that that could be accommodated for, but that's what we're kind of talking about.
I see.
So, and within ALA, it's what Emily, I think, spoke about earlier. We can't put an individual on we don't have a lot of individuals who are observant who might want to participate in the Caldecott or Newberry or other award committees because they all meet very much on Friday nights and Saturdays. And it's sort of problematic, you know, like that's a voice that's not being listened to in those situations.
I see.
So that's sort of what we're talking about. I hope did that get it, Emily? I mean, I'm not sure that covered it all, but it's not just like you didn't look at the calendar and you scheduled a meeting on Yom Kippur. It's a lot bigger than that. It's like,
absolutely.
you have a conference that happens on the weekend. And so right away, there's a percentage of your membership that won't be able to attend. Because we don't, you know, we can only come on Sunday and it's very expensive. So why do I even want to make that happen? So it's that kind of thing.
So that's like that's a big problem, not a small problem.
Correct. That's correct.
So how does ALA deal with that? You know, to take that seriously, it needs to take a look at how it structures its conferences. So is that something that I could do in a one-year term as ALA president? Probably not. But amplifying those concerns to the people in charge and beginning, it sounds like we're at the beginning of a conversation about making systemic changes that allow for inclusion of observant Jewish library workers in ALA and division level programming. Right. So we have to start that conversation and begin to sort of reckon with that and with the history of exclusion that you're talking about. When I was at Long Island University, Brooklyn, this is a downtown Brooklyn school with significant Jewish population and a significant Orthodox population. And the school ran a number of programs that happened on Sundays, right? So Sunday is the day that we had a social work degree program that was run between students in Brooklyn and students in Israel, and a sort of joint program that ran online. Staffing that was always a real challenge because not only did we need library workers to agree to come in and teach an information literacy session on a Sunday, but we needed a male librarian and a female librarian to do that because they were gender segregated classrooms. So like the answer to that, so I was the coordinator of library instruction, having to balance all of that. So the issue wasn't, we can't have this social work program. The library doesn't serve these students, right? Which would be the way to do it. But it was, this is a population that we serve and we need to change our work habits to accommodate this set of users. So, you know, we just divvied it up and it was just like clear that this was a commitment that we had to our students because we had to serve them. So could I so it's usually me, and normally the coordinator coordinates and doesn't teach the classes, but I'm a guy who just jumps in and does the thing that needs to be done. But moving the needle in a big association like ALA, which has a range of concerns, right, and a range of stakeholders, could we imagine an ALA that moves the book, the sort of award committees to a different day? Probably, but it would take a lot more work and a lot more putting sort of faith traditions at the, putting that at the table. And it sounds like that hasn't really happened. And I think there's probably coalitions that we could build across religious communities, because it's not like yours is the only faith tradition that has a day when it can't work, so making those connections.
But I think what you said is what's important is that what our drive is right now is having a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
We don't feel like we have a seat at the table, and we don't feel like we have a voice, even though there are, we have through Emerit, and we have through some other things, we have coalitions of Jewish librarians, but we don't feel like we really have a voice. One simple little thing is, we've tried working with other ethnic affiliates. We've tried to put together programs to deliver at ALA conferences, and we have yet to have anything selected. So what we're doing is going around that by having a president's program in concert with Emerit, and doing it through an affiliate situation. But the fact is that we're participating in the EDI assembly, we're participating in everything. Even still, we don't feel like anyone's listening to us for a lot of reasons, some of which I understand, some of which I don't. I mean, I know that we look like a bunch of white people coming into a community of a bunch of people of color and saying, wait a minute, but this last weekend, Jews all over the world were sitting, biting their nails, wondering if somebody was going to be killed because of their religious beliefs, because someone walked into a synagogue and decided that the Jews rule the world and the master Jew could release some person from prison. It's like none of that exists. There is no master Jew. There is no, there are if Jews were in control of the world, I wouldn't be living in Leisure World in Seal Beach. I can assure you of that. So anyway, so I don't want to co-opt the conversation. I just want you to be clear that our issue is we just want a seat at the table. Right. We'll be very vocal. We just want a seat at the table. So,
and this is where I think like bringing an organizing approach to the association would really be helpful for everybody, because it isn't enough to sort of make a statement or like put out a press release or put together it's like, what are the shared concerns and the shared demands here that are not just among Jewish librarians, but librarians across the association who can't attend the conference on the weekends because of childcare, because of all kinds of reasons that people can't attend on the weekend. So I've got a full slate of LibLearnX meetings on my calendar for this weekend. They can only happen if somebody else occupies my child, right? And so, as long as Karen's healthy, I'll be able to go to the conference, but it's like finding ways to connect your concerns with the concerns of a whole range of people across the association who find the same thing frustrating, but potentially for different reasons, and sort of making the sort of organizing work happen there rather than just around identity, which is important, but I think doesn't allow us to do the kind of essential coalition building we would have to do. Because you would find a lot of moms of young children in the same boat as like, we just simply can't do this on Saturday. So making those connections, I think, would be part of what was needed. Yeah.
I actually would like at this point to go. There's been 3 questions on chat.
I'm trying not to get distracted by chat. So go ahead.
Right. No, it's fine. I want to make sure that our attendees get their questions answered. So I'm going to go ahead and ask those 3. Please keep putting your questions into chat. So Elliot Gertel says, thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule to spend this time with us today. At ALA council meetings, which I used to be on council, and I've been through 2 of these resolutions. At ALA council meetings for at least 3 decades, CERT has been putting forward highly biased, one-sided anti-Israel resolutions, often advancing unfounded accusations such as alleged destruction of valuable or irreplaceable Palestinian archives and libraries, without a shred of evidence that such archives and libraries even existed. These resolutions, by singling out Israel, are definitely anti-Semitic in nature, especially since the advocates completely disregard actual serious human rights violations of many other of Israel's neighbors, such as Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, Syria, Iran, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and terrorist organizations such as ISIS or ISIL and Al-Qaeda, as well as the oppression and ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya in Burma and the Uyghurs in China, just to name a few examples. A few of these highly contentious resolutions were actually passed by Council. Another was passed by ALA Annual Conference in 2002, was not overturned at ALA Midwinter in 2003. Two more were soundly defeated at ALA. This is, I guess, when I was on Council at ALA. As a member of CERT yourself, which I know doesn't mean you necessarily support such resolutions, and as potentially the president of ALA, what would you say or do to try to curb such egregiously unbalanced and often not factual resolutions on the part of CERT leadership and any other roundtable committee division or caucus in ALA? This is not merely a matter of First Amendment or free speech rights. Libraries are supposed to be about presenting facts based on reputable and accurate sources, not spreading propaganda to try to validate a particular political viewpoint and agenda.
Well, I'm glad that it's nothing but easy questions. that's a real that's a tough one. That's a tough one. You know, and I appreciate the passion behind the question. These are issues that I talk about in my own family and in my community. And what I would say is that they are deeply political questions. And I know that probably won't be popular with everyone here, but I think these are not settled questions. There are real conflicts in the Middle East that are serious and not like I don't know that the sort of framing of the question and your description of the resolutions, I don't know that that aligns with how I understand those movements within the association. So I'll say that. I think what needs to happen is a full airing of every position. So I guess I would ask, and maybe you want to just unmute and we can just have the question, Elliot, but how have you sort of pushed for this position within ALA? And do you see a role for the president in that? I'm not sure I do.
How have I pushed for them? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've gone to council meetings as a non-council member and had to form sort of small alliances with other council members because non-council members generally are not allowed to speak.
That's right.
At the council. In fact, I spoke with Emily in 2015 several times, and Andrew Wertheimer, who was the state representative for Hawaii, and have advocated and had some of my thoughts advanced on the floor by the actual council members. Although in 2003 at ALA in Philadelphia, Midwinter, we were unsuccessful in overturning the resolution that was passed in Atlanta in 2002. And by 2015, I believe council was actually starting, council turns over every couple of years, and it's large, very large, so I think 80 or 100 members. And we were very, very successful. I think council was actually finally getting disgusted with these one-sided resolutions, and they really are one-sided because they always focus on Israel. And I think the council got it that these were actually anti-Semitic. Whether the people who advanced them were actually consciously anti-Semitic or not, that's the effect of such resolutions. And I hope that if they're advanced again, they will be soundly defeated like they were in 2015, both in Chicago at Midwinter and in San Francisco at Annual. And I was for a long time the chair of the Jewish Information Committee, which is now at Emily B. Has that role, and she also has one of my former roles. I was the ALA AJL ALA liaison for quite a long time,
Mhm.
from at least from 2008 for 2020. So I do my best to advocate our viewpoint. I know
Mhm.
that these viewpoints are conflicting, but if something is based on facts, fine, get it out there. I just don't I don't like people trying to push their political agenda on very highly contentious issues, which I think for the most part is not part of ALA's mission.
So is
If
your,
there had been a destruction of actual libraries and archives in the Palestinian territories, and I think our president at the time this was advanced, Perlberger, had a really good letter published in American Libraries refuting with facts and accurate information that this was just not true. I think it was something like plans and blueprints for terrorist activities were actually destroyed in the action by the IDF.
so your position would be that there are no Palestinian archives or libraries that have been destroyed by the state of Israel?
With proven
I don't want
factually.
this to.
Yeah, I don't want to get,
I
I
yeah,
don't want
careful
to get
here.
into a political
I
discussion.
Okay.
don't think we
here.
want to get into like a discussion of
Right.
the
Okay.
Middle East
What I'd
conflict.
like to hear from Emily
Yeah.
is as I am not a member of CERT, so I wondered, what I liked about that is that you are a CERT member and these
Yes.
come out of CERT. And the other part of this question is that I just want to reiterate that ALA has a protocol that not to support boycotts, but BDS is a boycott. So can we make sure that ALA follows its own rules?
So, the rule we have in the union movement, or that I have for myself in the union movement, is I don't advance anything unless it builds the organization. So I believe that a strong ALA can push public opinion and legislation that supports the library ecosystem, school libraries, public libraries, special libraries, and academic libraries, which is where I find my home. I find the conversation, like you saw how quickly in just this short conversation, we were in conflict about issues that I think we're probably in conflict about, right? Like Elliot, you and I probably don't agree about the politics here, but I don't know that you and I agreeing on that moves the needle as far as public policy in the state of Israel or in the United States. I don't think it's useful for the organization to have this kind of fight. And what I would prefer to do, and my preferred vision would be, how can we connect to one another around the things that matter to us most? So I don't believe that you and I having this battle would do anything to either advance either of our political positions on this front or build the association. And so for me, what I focus on is what we can do together. And what we can do together is support libraries of all kinds in all parts of the world, especially those subject to violence, and that's something we can agree on. And I think the role of the association is to find those connections and build on those together. So that's what I'd say.
Okay, may I say one more thing? I think I would be just as opposed to somebody advancing a resolution that talks about it's particularly pro-Israel and talks about pro-Israel. And I don't think these highly contentious, often unfounded sorts of resolutions are a part of what should be a part of ALA. I also participated in a few of those nighttime council meetings that are open to anybody and had some very strong back and forth with some SRT members, SRRT members about this. But on the other hand, I've been disturbed that hardly any resolutions about actual Jewish libraries, like the one in Sacramento and in, I think it was in Ottawa, in Ontario, were actually firebombed and seriously vandalized by anti-Semites. And I don't think any of those were ever advanced as councils that I think those are appropriate for council to condemn. What do you think about that, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I think the destruction of any library anywhere is a real problem. It's devastating to our sense of history, our sense of community, to the extent that libraries are part of the social fabric of life. Their destruction anywhere is a significant problem. And I don't think anyone at ALA would disagree with that. I think that's a core value that we all share. ALA has lots of, climate change is the one that I really see claiming a bunch of libraries, like libraries in Boulder in the line of that fire, libraries that are underwater in island nations. Like, addressing those kinds of concerns seems within the purview of the organization to me. But again, we need to be having conversations that build our connections to each other rather than tearing us apart, when I think we all share the same sort of set of concerns about what libraries can do and be.
And that's what I think the problem with those those CERT resolutions were tearing ALA apart. They weren't building what you're talking about, Emily, which I totally agree with.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, like you join CERT and you make it do what you want it to do. It's definitely been my approach, right? It's like, it's our organization. And if we want it to move in a certain direction, it's our sort of task to step up. Yeah.
Okay, I want to move along because I want to make sure everybody's questions are asked. This is, as an academic librarian, this is going to be interesting to us. Paul Glassman asked, can you envision a business model in which there is more incentive to join ACRL? I think the requirement to join ALA at the same time is discouraging as currently presented. This is an age-old problem.
Age-old problem, age-old question. Hi, Paul. Paul, you were at LIU before me, right? I think so. Paul's a former Blackbird like me.
Yes, I had to unmute. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for remembering. Yes,
Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, yeah. Your reputation hung around for a long time. People really missed you there. So I think, right now, as I'm meeting with you all, the ALA division leaders are in a separate meeting to talk about the operating agreement. They're making sort of changes to the operating agreement. That's the plan that's happening right now. And so I don't have an answer to that question, except that I know that it's a significant problem. So I was in a meeting yesterday, and the an executive board meeting, they reported membership declines year over year, 8% from last year, 11% over the last 2 years. I think those are the numbers. So clearly there are barriers to being members of the association that we need to address. I think those are things like how much it costs to join, which is sort of what you're pointing to, Paul, a sense that we don't get enough out of our membership. What am I paying for, right? What is this association doing for me? And those are all questions that I think sort of more robust and public facing leadership can help answer. So that would be part of what I would want to do, is like make the case that that's important. I also, I think it just simply has to be less costly for people to be members. And, for me, my division home is ACRL. It's long been my division home. That's where I've done most of my service work. That's where I feel most connected. And I think most people feel that way, that their division or the roundtable that they're in is sort of where they get most of the sort of meaningful kind of thick connections that I'm talking about. So I don't have a vision for a business model, but I do know they're working on it because everybody sees that this is the problem.
Thank you.
This is sort of one of the questions that I had was, I hear from AJL members all the time that they don't see value in ALA for their cost of membership. So that's sort of what you were speaking to. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but we have many members of AJL who don't belong to ALA because it's so expensive and there's not the value.
Yeah, so I think like the cost is a serious issue. And, the president is not a role where, I would have a year. So these are structural issues. The executive board went into executive session yesterday, so kicked the observers out to have conversations about membership. So I know it's on the docket for them.
Okay.
In terms of value, I think one of the mistakes we make as an association is pitching a membership in ALA as transactional. That if I pay to be a member of ALA, I get a car rental discount and I can go to the meeting for a little less money, right? Those are sort of not compelling enough, I think, reasons to join, which is why I think we need leadership that is really quite loud about how important libraries are and library workers are of all kinds, so that we can sort of make a better case for the association as a thing you join because you want to be part of something that you're proud of. I joined ALA in library school because it stood for principles and values that I held. And so I think there's got to be more of that. Like I'd like us to get back to sort of the crucial values that we have as library workers and as organizations. Lessa, the incoming president, the president-elect Lessa, I've seen her platform or her sort of set of initiatives for this year, and they are for her presidential year, and their focus is on library workers. Work has value. all work is dignified, our communities are brave, and the sort of messaging and story that we tell to ourselves and to the outside world about how important we are, I think is one way for the association to be something that people want to be a part of. Because in my experience, people don't, you don't want to say yes to something compelling. And I don't know that the association has been a great job of making itself compelling to younger members. So like I'm on Twitter all the time and people are like, the Library Association isn't doing anything around intellectual freedom. Well, if you're an insider who understands what OIF is doing, you know that they've dealt with 300 challenges this year, and like they work incredibly hard on a shoestring budget, but largely under the radar. So how do I communicate to the membership that all of that work is happening? I think would be sort of the task of the president, and thinking about ways to both make the association financially solvent while making membership more accessible seems to be a crucial piece of that story.
That's a great segue into a question from Sean Boyle, who is currently the president of the School Synagogue Center Public Library Division of AJL. All right. Protecting intellectual freedom is a core ALA value. How do librarians address requests to pull books when the author is accused or convicted of heinous crimes?
That's a good question. As an academic librarian, I have to say that I don't have a lot of experience managing book challenges. It isn't something that happens so much in academic libraries.
Sean is a school librarian.
Yeah, so I would really be looking to my school librarian colleagues to help me understand how best to make that happen. I know that Texas has just instituted a sort of hotline where you can call and get a team of people to help you. ALA has ready access for people dealing with a challenge, with book challenges, and a toolkit that can help deal with that. I think, again, a lot of our members are managing and navigating those kinds of situations by themselves. So I think we have a role as an association in helping everybody see that they're part of a bigger team, and that other people will have your back and stand up with you and give you the sort of tools and talk necessary to sort of fight back those challenges. I do think, making sure that our libraries have books of all kinds is really crucial, and that's a core library value and one that I share.
So this is up your alley. What is your vision on how libraries support lifelong learning needs?
I mean, one of the reasons I got into libraries in the first place is because they're a non-coercive space where you can learn, right? They were a key. I'm one of probably lots of us in the field who spent our lunches in the library in school. It's like a place where you can feel sort of safe and have access to ideas and novels and all kinds of things. And so I think, the role of libraries and lifelong learning, we're the only sort of part of the social fabric that has that as its sort of core mission. So we contribute to lifelong learning by providing equitable access to information of all kinds to all types of people, by maintaining spaces that are heated in the winter and cooled in the summer, that have light and bathrooms, that have people inside of them who can help you find what you're looking for, shape your questions, run a book group, screen some films at the library. When I was at the public library, I did a lot of that kind of public programming that I think helps people sort of stay active in their intellectual lives. So I think those are huge contributions. In the academic library space, we do talk a lot about external relationships and coalitions. We have a new program here at the Graduate Center where I work with, it's a peer-to-peer lifelong learning program of retirees who teach classes to each other inside of the Graduate Center. So we support that work by sort of giving library trainings and making sure we acquire materials relevant to those programs. So I think it's, we're the people who do that. We're the people who make that possible for people. I don't see a library ecosystem without those priorities and commitments.
And here's my favorite of Sean's questions. What is your most rewarding experience as a librarian?
Well, as soon as I said that thing about public libraries, and this is like, not that, I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of a dismal story, but okay, I'm going to tell it and then you can tell me what you think. When I was working at the public library, I loved working with patrons who needed help picking a book, right? Reader's advisory. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And this woman came in and she wanted help finding Kafka's The Trial. And I was like, okay, that's a heavy book. I don't know. I read it in college. I never want to read it again. And I said, oh, what makes you pick up this book? And she said, it's one of the 10 books I want to read again before I die. She was like at this end of life moment. And I had connected her with this book that she needed. So that's like one of my, it was like a meaningful moment in the public library service, because I was both connecting her to a book, you know, connecting people to resources is what I do for a living. But it also was like an encounter with a person at a particular moment in life who is willing to be vulnerable about that, share it with me, and to have that kind of connection for just a minute with someone. And those sort of connections for just a minute with someone are the experiences that I really value in my work as a librarian. So I was working at Sarah Lawrence College, and somebody came in and she needed microfilm, and she was using the microfilm. And you know how if you're a novice and you're not a professional, you turn the knob and your film goes way, 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 way too fast. So she turned the knob and it gone way, way too fast, and it made her dizzy, and she passed out, fainted. It was like an actual like library accident. But being able to respond to her in that moment, get her water, get her sat up, and a little juice, and helping her through that moment, and getting her back on the microfilm machine with a little more training so she could use it effectively. It's like those kinds of moments. I love unjamming the stapler. I'm really good at it. Love fixing the printer, like that kind of like hands-on library work. Those are the moments that I value the most. And there are a lot of like big picture things that I'm proud of, but you can see those on my CV. And they're not the things that are most meaningful to me personally.
What do you bring to the table that is unique and will help ALA move forward?
Super enthusiastic, and I want to have a good time. And I think those are things that we need more of in our leaders. I would say, radically inclusive. Everybody's invited. Rather than put together like a campaign team, I have weekly campaign calls. Anybody's welcome to join in. We're sort of growing the number of people who feel like they can have a say in what the priorities are, making sure I listen to everybody and get a full sort of picture, that we build our analysis together through doing the work together, and keeping people connected to each other. So just before this, I had a meeting with somebody I know from council who's thinking of moving from the public library space to the academic library space. We took a look at her resume, we talked about her cover letter a little bit, and another friend of mine who I know from San Francisco just made the switch from public library to academic library. And she and I had worked on her cover letter a little bit to make the transition make sense. So now I'm going to connect those two so that they can have a conversation. So I think that is the kind of like organizing and connecting energy that I bring to my work, and that I would bring to ALA. When I was active in my union at my last job, my nickname was the switchboard, because I'm just like, well, let's hook them together. Let's hook them together. And so that kind of energy for connection and energy for sort of building thick relationships among us, I think is sort of what I would bring to the association that I think would be refreshing and kind of new. Not that that kind of work isn't happening all the time, but I've often felt left out of it. And I think a lot of us have, who feel like the decisions are being made without us, that it's without sort of the big thing coming up at council. This conference is about sort of reorganizing council and the governance structure of ALA. Is that I've been to 2 meetings about it already, and people are like, when are we going to have a chance to talk about this? In the moments where they're having a chance to talk about this. So there's something not connecting, right? People aren't feeling like there's room and space within the association to talk about the things that matter to them. So building those spaces and building those connections, I think would be my priority, and would be refreshing, and would make sense with sort of the vision that Lessa has. And I don't know her well, but knowing her platform, I think it aligns with a lot of the things that I care about. So it would be an honor to work sort of in the same set of years with her, and we share a lot of the same values and vision, I think.
All right, I think we have time. So this is my question. And I know that several of us have had this experience where leadership says, I belong to all the ethnic affiliates.
Yeah.
And they don't belong to AJL. And I brought this up when Patty Wong said that, and she and I had a wonderful phone conversation, and I think she and I have really moved our relationship forward. But I can't have this personal relationship with everybody. And I see this so often in ALA, whether it's a personal situation where someone says, I belong to all the ethnic affiliates, but HAL isn't included, or when they did that big DEI survey and research, and it was all librarians of color, not Jews or Muslims or right. So what are your thoughts on how to move this forward so we get included as one of those ethnic affiliates?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like, I'm not an insider enough to know how those decisions get made and how the conversations happen. I think I was not aware that this was an association that I could join. As soon as you invited me, I was like, oh, I didn't even know that existed, right? So that speaks to something, both my ignorance and failure to like fully appreciate and understand the breadth of organizations in the library space. But like you say, it can't just be one-on-one relationships. Like you have to call me on the phone and then I join, right? But I think finding the connections, the ways that the sort of other ethnic caucuses and the Jewish groups and the Muslim groups and all the groups, like what are our shared concerns and visions and values, and making those connections there rather than focusing on what keeps us different and separate, I think is important. Not that I don't appreciate difference, like that's the cornerstone of who I am as a political person, is an appreciation and respect for difference and an embrace of that. But finding the sort of places where things overlap and connect. Do you have an idea about why that connection hasn't been made? Do you understand it at all?
So I just want to interject here that as a result of our talking with Kelvin last week, we have now connected with the JCLC to talk, and I have a charter that I need to write a letter to all the presidents of the ethnic affiliates and talk about, you know, the similarities between our organizations and what's happening to Jews versus what's happening in the rest of the world. And so I'm trying right now this week to write that letter, which is, of course, as you can imagine, not the easiest letter to write. But we are in conversation. And that's, to me, again, what I was saying before, just that feels to me like, okay, we may have the opportunity to get a seat at the table. And that's the way I'm going to describe it, is we just feel we need to have a seat at the table. You know, because being Jewish is not just your religion, it's like your life. So, you know, it's, and you live in a Jewish family, so you know, it's like you have a different calendar, you have a different, you know, everything is different from what's going on in the rest of the world, right? So it's sort of like we just want to make people aware that that's what it is, that we belong in that group. And the conversations I've had, I spoke last week with the president, I believe, of the JCLC, Richard, I can't remember his last name. He was very clear that, you know, he believes that JCLC should change their name, that it shouldn't just be about people of color, that it should be about people of differences, right? And so I think we're starting, it's going to be a long process, a long trek to get this done. But we have a charter, we know what we need to do, we just have to get going on it, and I'm working on that now. So.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a country where large numbers of people, including members of my own sort of birth family, will tell you that Christmas is a secular holiday, right? So like that's what you're up against, is this kind of like,
that's right,
the dominant perspective is really dominant, you know. So it's,
there's no question,
but I think, you know, it's like a letter is important and that kind of stuff is important, but the integration, I think, is well, that's person to person, long conversations.
Yes, and that's
in front of mind.
Felt so good talking to people and just being able to have the communication and saying, okay, what do we need to do? You know, I want to go to the JCLC conference. I can go on Thursday because the conference starts on Yom Kippur and it ends on Saturday. So I need to find a way to get in there, and I want to be able to say, how can I get in there for one 24-hour period and have as many conversations as possible,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, because that's real
Yeah.
change, right? It's like,
Yes, right, right.
there are no shortcuts. It is conversation by
You've gotta have
conversation,
it.
person by
That's
person.
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, but I think what Emily said is true for AJL, just as it's true for ALA. You are president for a year, right? I
Mhm.
was on council for 3 years. So I'm not there anymore to see what happens in council.
Mhm.
You only have a year.
Yeah.
And somebody has to be there to say, wait a minute, you can't do a whole study of diversity and not include me as part of that diversity. And I don't have an answer to how to do that, but you put your finger on it. What can I do in a year?
Well, I think what you can do in a year is also like recognize that staff at the association, the executive director, Tracy Hall, these are people who persist across presidencies.
right.
So you need to institutionalize it, you know, and every interaction I've had with Tracy, which has like not been that many, you know, but just like when I go to meetings and I see her talking, she's somebody who's really committed to equity inside of the association. And I think, you know, is like the way for the president, somebody in that presidential role, it could be Patty, it could be Lessa, it could be Kelvin, it could be me, needs to just like push it and make it, this needs to institutionalize in conference planning, you know, because like that's the part that those are the people who sort of make the calendar decisions, right? And then, you know, institutionalizing it within an organization. So like in my work, we have workflows and you got to check all these boxes. I just finished a hiring process. It's very clear that you have to do all of these little things. And so one of the things needs to be check the calendar for major holidays that affect parts of our association. You know, it just needs to be part of the normal way of doing business. You know, it needs to be a box on the list that we're going to go through, right? So that it doesn't get missed, because it can't get missed because it's in the workflow and it's institutionalized in our processes. So I don't know how much I could move the needle on that, but I would definitely care about it. Because it matters to me also. Because if I miss Passover ever again for any kind of library thing, my girlfriend will kill me. So it happened once and it won't happen again.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
We're actually up against time.
Thank you so much, Emily, for this rich conversation. I really appreciated the chance to meet with you.
Thank you, Emily, for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for attending. As I said, the recording will be up by tomorrow.
Thanks,
And
Emily.
Emily, I want to thank you. We definitely put you on the hot grill and you survived. So I want to thank you for your time and for everything you've said. And we appreciate your coming and talking with us. Thank you so very much.
I appreciate it, Kathy. Have a good day, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.